This lecture accompanies the chapter on health and safety. Your instructor is Jack Creel. Jack Creel is a licensed general engineering and general building contractor and holds several specialty licenses as well as the asbestos abatement and hazardous substance removal certificates. Jack will review the chapter page by page. Be sure to have a pen or highlighter ready to take notes.
Please take out your books and let's start with health and safety orders on page HS1. California administers its own program for workers' health and safety via the California Occupational Safety and Health Administration, Cal-OSHA. I have taken a number of trade exams, including the general engineering and the general building, and I have found a number of questions on those exams relating to health and safety. It's important. Construction is a dangerous business, and it can be made safe, and it's necessary to be made safe. So let's get started. On the third paragraph on this first page, in the middle of the paragraph, it talks about construction safety orders. This is what you're going to be tested on, and this relates to construction industry regulations and safety matters. Let's take a look at the bottom of the page, the Injury and Illness Prevention Program. Understand that every employer must have a written IIPP that includes at least the following, and there are 7 items there, 7 programs or systems. Look over that, understand what you're going to be needing to have for your health and safety regulations. Going on to the next page, HS2. One of the things that is particularly emphasized is tailgate meetings. It is required that you have a tailgate meeting for health and safety every 10 working days. It is working days. It is also recommended that you have a supervisors and management meeting once a month to discuss safety and implement safety and health regulations. You should also have a code of safe practices, a written code. Now you'll find that available through Cal-OSHA, and they will help you with model codes so you can get what you need from Cal-OSHA. Let's look at some of the administrative requirements under Cal-OSHA. In that first paragraph under administrative requirements, note that you do have to keep written records, and they have to be kept for 5 years. And if they deal with matters such as asbestos that are long-lasting, you'll have to keep them for some 30 years. As you go through this health and safety part of your trade exam, make sure that when you see numbers like 5, 30, that you're most likely going to be asked a question about that, and you should pay attention to those pieces of information. In that second paragraph where it begins, employers must report. They must report any fatality, serious injury, serious illness, a blasting accident, immediately by phone or telegraph to the nearest district office of the Division of Occupational Safety and Health, DOSH. What is immediately? Immediately in this sense indicates that you have to get back to them within 24 hours. And what is a serious injury? A serious injury is when an employee suffers a loss of any member of the body or has to be hospitalized for 24 hours or longer, not just for observation but for treatment. And serious injury also includes disfigurement, permanent disfigurement. Looking at the bottom of this page under permits, let's look at when you do need to get a permit from DOSH. If your construction, excavation, or trench is 5 feet or deeper and the workers must enter, you will need to get a permit. If the construction or the demolition of any building or structure is more than 3 stories high, 1 story is 12 feet. If you're dealing with construction elevators, and if there's any large or sometimes small air tanks, in those situations you will need permits from DOSH. Let's turn to page HS3. There's several things here I'd like to talk about. Let's look at hazardous substances. The employer must provide workers with material safety data sheets, MSDS, and training when using any substance listed in the list of hazardous substances developed by the Director of the Department of Industrial Relations. There's another thing I'd like to mention here is the Powder Actuated Tool Certificate. No one may operate a powder-actuated tool until he or she has received training as prescribed by the manufacturer and carries a valid operator's card for the tool. And I also want to call your attention to work areas. There are several general rules there, how to organize things. Particularly the face of a pile of cement bags more than 5 feet high must be tapered back. I was at a situation many years ago. The bags were stacked up quite higher than that. All of a sudden they started to creep and move. The worker didn't realize that they were. I alerted him. He jumped out of the way. The bags all came down, but fortunately all of us were safe. Turning on to page HS4. Read through this. One of the things that Cal OSHA is particularly concerned about is hearing protection. Employers must monitor noise and administer a hearing conservation program when noise exposure is 85 decibels or more. To give you an idea of what a decibel is, if you are at home and speaking, the level of decibel noise is about 60. If you're at a construction site, for example, and hear a riveting machine, you're about 30 feet away, you're in about 100 decibel level. Look over this, understand that the sound levels as they get higher reduce the time significantly. And at the bottom of the page it indicates a couple of different ways of protecting your ears through earplugs or earmuffs, sound deadening earmuffs. Going on to page HS5. At the top of page HS5, head protection is dealt with, and then respiratory protection. Cal OSHA is particularly concerned about respiratory protection. This is a condition that can cause serious injury very quickly. If engineering or operational controls are not practical to limit harmful exposure to airborne contaminants, a NIOSH or MSHA approved respirator must be worn by exposed employees. When we talk about engineering or operational controls, in other words, if they can't contain the contaminant away from the employee, then the employee has to put on a respirator of some sort or another. There are certain situations where an employee must wear air supplying respirators. There's two different types of respirators. One is an air purifying respirator, which deals with the ambient air and filters out the offending contaminants. The second type of a respirator is an air supplying, in which air from another source, totally separate from the environment around the worker, is used. Air supplying respirators are used during blasting when dust may exceed limits specified in the general industry safety orders, during blasting with silica sand, sandblasting for example, or where oxygen concentration goes below 19.5%, or where toxic material is present. And this is an important item, a little two-line sentence here just above occupational health. Employees must not be assigned to work requiring respirators unless they are physically able to work in one, as determined by a licensed physician. Let's go on to occupational health. Read through the next part there, dealing with chemical contaminants, exhaust, carcinogens, cancer-causing items, and wood preservative chemicals. And then let's get on to page HS6. We're going to be talking about asbestos. Cal OSHA is quite concerned about asbestos and has several regulations. If you are in a situation where you're going to be dealing with a 0.1% asbestos by dry weight situation where it's going to be either sanded or ground or blasted or sawn or cut, shoveled, removed, in other words, dealt with in virtually any way that might disturb it or cut it, it is required that you report that operation to the chief of DOSH before you begin. On the fourth paragraph, let's look at the following work practices that must be followed when using asbestos. A HEPA filter must be used. This is a certain type of high-level filter. Asbestos must be handled wet if possible. Asbestos waste and debris must be collected in sealed, impermeable, leak-proof bags. Let's look at exposure. There are two different types of exposures. Now, just just at the middle of the page there, where it begins an employee must not be exposed to a concentration of airborne asbestos rated at more than 0.1 fibers per cubic centimeter, averaged over an 8-hour period. This is called the permissible exposure limit, PEL. Only fibers longer than 5 microns are counted. There's an additional type of exposure. It's called an excursion exposure. It's more or less of an in and out exposure. Let's look at that. The short-term or excursion maximum is 1 fiber per cubic centimeter of air, averaged over a 30-minute period. Possibility of exposure above those values requires caution signs, protective clothing, a change room, and notification of both the employee and the chief of DOSH. Toward the bottom of the page, there's a big capitalized, bold statement there. Commit this to memory. Monitoring or medical records must be kept for at least 30 years. Asbestos is a long-lasting item that concerns health and safety, and we need to have those records available. Going on to page HS7. Read through the confined space, and let me emphasize toward the bottom here, just above the bullets, ventilation is required if testing reveals a hazard. Working in a confined space where dangerous air contamination exists requires, and there are a certain number of things here. First, of course, is a respiratory protection. Next is a safety harness attached to a retrieval line and equipment. Here's an important item. An additional employee or one employee standing by with a respirator trained in CPR outside of the area, not inside the area. And additional 3 or 4 more items. Go ahead and read through that. Toward the bottom of the page, under sanitation, 1 toilet must be provided for every 20 employees. Commit that to memory. You can be sure that you'll most likely see that on a trade exam. On to page HS8, fire protection, prevention, and fighting. One of the important items in this first paragraph at the top of the page, portable fire extinguishers must be inspected monthly and serviced yearly. I'll repeat that. Inspected monthly and serviced yearly. And they must be placed within 75 feet of work areas. You might be asked these next 3 chemical compositions whether they are allowed. They are no longer allowed because they are cancer-causing. Carbon tetrachloride, chlorobromomethane, or methyl bromide. Down to the middle of the page under access prohibitions. At elevations over 15 feet high, walking on open beams or sliding down beams without safety belts is prohibited. Iron workers are not exempt. Read through the stairway section toward the bottom of the page there, and let's go on to page HS9. Ladders. We have a healthy respect for ladders, and Cal OSHA has a lot to say about ladders. Ladders are used almost in every trade. I have a healthy respect for ladders. I remember some years ago, fell off a 3-foot high part of the ladder and ended up with a 4-month set of crutches. So let's take a look at ladders. Very first part there. Ladder rungs must be at least 11.5 inches long and spaced 12 inches apart. Step ladders may not be taller than 20 feet. A step ladder that tall would be pretty heavy. You usually see them maybe up to 14 or 16, but the limit is 20 feet. Cleat or straight ladders may not be longer than 30 foot. And extension ladders may not be taller than 44 foot. Overlapping sections must be at least 10% of its working length. So if you have a 20-foot ladder, you have to overlap it by 2 feet. Look over the rest of this page in job-built ladders and landing platforms. Understand the safety thrust here that's going on. Turning the page to HS10. Ladder safety. Secure ladders in use against movement. I had a situation where a worker didn't do that. It's just recently. He's nursing a ruptured Achilles tendon and maybe another part of his foot. He's getting fine, but as we said after the accident, ladder safety. Don't stand on the top 3 rungs of rung ladders without handholds unless you are protected by a safety belt. Okay, that's an important item. And extend ladder side rails at least 3 feet above a landing or top platform unless handholds are provided. The next part, determining the safe pitch of a ladder, is very important. You most likely will see this on one trade exam or another. Let's take a look at a couple of the ways to do it. First way to set a ladder correctly is to put it 75.5 degrees angled to the ground. This is very important. Look at the little diagram to the right there. You can get an idea of what 75 degrees looks like. In day-to-day construction on the job site, one of the easiest ways to do it is to put it 1 foot for every 4 foot. And that works out simply to be a 1-to-4 ratio. So 4 feet up, 1 foot out. If you're 12 feet up, then you're going to be 3 foot out. Do not place planks on or stand on the top of step ladders. And do not paint ladders, this is wood ladders particularly, with opaque coatings. Why? With the paint, you're going to cover over cracks in the ladder that indicate that the ladder is to be destroyed and discarded. And do not use metal ladders near exposed electrical parts. The next item I want to mention is marking metal ladders. Mark all portable metal ladders. Caution, do not use around electrical equipment. And why do we put that caution sign on metal ladders? Metal ladders are conductors. If the top of that metal ladder connects with a high voltage line, you seriously risk electrocution. It has happened too many times, so take that caution. Go ahead and read down through the rest of the page, noting the different types of ladders. I myself like to purchase the 1 or 1A ladder, even though it might weigh a few more pounds. Continue reading down through ramps and runways, and let's go on to page HS11. Toward the top of the page, powered buggy ramps and runways. Ramps and runways must be at least 5 feet wide and designed with turnouts for two-way traffic. It's important that you know that. It's a question that may well be asked of you. It's a simple item to remember. 5 feet wide for a ramp or runway. Read through construction elevators, and let's go on to page HS12. We're going to be talking about excavations, trenches, and earthwork. This is a very important part of safety and health. DOSH has unfortunately found out that there are a lot of fatalities, particularly in trenches, and it's sudden. So let's look at, before you dig, go ahead and read through that, and let's look at a situation where you have 4 foot or more depth from digging a trench. I'm going to read it to you. Provide a safe way for workers to enter and leave the excavation, for example, ladders, within 25 feet of any work area, a minimum of every 50 feet at a large site. And if soil conditions are unstable, you must slope, support, or shore excavations of any depth. If you're at a situation where you're 5 feet or more, pay particular attention to the first item there of 3. Number 1, or A, if workers are required to enter the excavation, you must obtain a permit from DOSH before starting the work. Pay attention to that. Read those other 2, and then let's go on to the next page, HS13. We deal with shafts and shoring on this page, and underneath the diagram there where it shows the trench boxes, and those trench boxes are huge steel constructions, it shows the different types of soils. And let's look at the second diagram there where it shows different types of soils. Note that in type B soils, which is an average type of soil, you are required to do a 1-to-1 slope. In other words, it must slope back 1 foot for every 1 foot of height. Let's go on to page HS14. Guardrails. Open sides of all work surfaces 7.5 feet high or higher must be guarded by railings or periphery cables or else workers must be protected by safety belts or nets. Floor and roof openings in any work surface must be covered or guardrailed. Covers must bear a warning sign. Let's take a quick look at the sketch here, or the diagram of the railing. Note that it has 3 rails, a top rail, a mid rail, and a toe board. The purpose of the toe board is to keep things from falling down into workers below, particularly tools, heavy tools, or materials such as bricks. Please go ahead and read the information on floor planking, and then let's go on to page HS15. Safety belts at the top of the page. Look at that second bullet. If you are exposed to falling more than 15 feet from buildings, bridges, structures, or construction members such as trusses, beams, purlins, or plates, you are required to be in a safety belt. Look at the rest of those bullets. Go ahead and read through those. Let's come down to safety nets. When are safety nets needed? Safety nets must be installed when safety belts and lines are required, but their use is impractical. In other words, the safety belt would be in the way of getting the job done. The nets must be installed no more than 25 feet below the work surface, so limiting the fall to a maximum of 25 feet. And they must extend at least 8 feet beyond the edge of the building or the structure. Let's look at scaffolds. Scaffolds are very convenient for construction work and very dangerous. So DOSH puts a lot of information and attention on scaffolds. As a matter of fact, one of the founders of this company that provides these lectures, on his first day of construction, saw his friend fall from the scaffold and had to go and tell the wife that he had died. So it's important that scaffolds be put up correctly and safely. If you're dealing with a scaffold that's going to be 3 stories or 36 feet or higher, you need to get a permit from DOSH before you get started with that. Read through the rest of scaffolds, and let's go on to page HS16. Required safety and access and securing scaffolds. Go ahead and read that. And let's look briefly at scaffold platforms. Let's look at light trades and heavy trades. Platform minimum width. How wide does that platform have to be? If it's a light trade, 20 inches by 10 feet in length. So it has to be at least 20 inches wide. If it's a heavy trade, it's going to have to be at least 4 feet wide by only 7 feet long. 7 is the maximum that you could go. You would need a stiffer board for heavier trades, of course. Let's go down to scaffold planking. And this is using scaffold grade lumber. That's a high grade of lumber. Make sure that you've got scaffold grade lumber. The minimum size is 2 inches thick and at least 10 inches wide. Maximum span when using this scaffold planking, if you're a light duty trade like carpentry, for example, and you're at a 25 pounds per square foot, you can get as much as 10 foot in length on your plank. But if you get into the medium duty or the heavy duty, look how that drops. It drops from 8 feet and then finally to 7 feet maximum for a heavy duty trade such as masonry. On a scaffold railing, let's just go ahead and read here. Standard guardrails must be installed on open sides and ends of scaffold platforms that are 7.5 feet or higher. I don't know about you, but when I've been on a scaffold, if there's a railing around me, I feel I can do more work more efficiently and not have to worry about falling off that scaffold. So go ahead and put those guardrails up. On scaffold height limits, let's look at the bottom of the page here. We've got 4. First 2 are heavy-duty steel of different types. You can go up to as much as 125 feet in height. That'd be essentially 10 stories. It's quite a bit. On a wood frame or post scaffold, you can go up 60 feet. On a horse, which is basically 2 sawhorses with planks on top, you can go up as high as 10 foot. Flip the page to HS17 and let's look a little bit more at some scaffolds that are prohibited. Top of the page on HS17. The 2 at the top there, the diagrammed ones. That's the shore scaffold to the left. It's shored up by that diagonal pole. And the lean-to jack or jack scaffold on the right there. Why are they prohibited? Simply because they're site-built without an engineer on site. Cal OSHA has seen too many problems, too many bad accidents from these, so they simply out and out prohibit them. The next subject is specialized scaffolds. Each trade has its own different type of scaffold, and as you study your trade exam, make sure that you understand the specific scaffolds that are used in your trade. You will most likely be asked questions about those types of scaffolds. Looking at the tube and coupler scaffolds, what I need you to do is simply look at the diagram and understand the different terms there. For example, ledger, ribbon, cross bracing, so on and so forth. Bring those to memory. And let's go on to page HS18. Very top there, tower and rolling scaffolds. On that fifth bullet that begins two wheels or casters must swivel. All four must lock. Okay, until you have that situation on your scaffold, you're not legal with Cal OSHA. And are you going to ride that moving scaffold? Well, it's prohibited unless all of the following conditions are met. The surface is smooth and within 3 degrees of level. The smaller dimension of the scaffold base is at least half the scaffold height. And C, the wheels have rubber or similar resilient tires or metal wheels for towers 50 feet or more. Go ahead and look at mobile ladder stands and suspension scaffolds, and let's get on to HS19. Let's look at suspended bricklayers or masons scaffolds. This makes particular sense to me. When I took my exam, my masonry exam, my C29 exam, I had several questions regarding scaffolds because it was specific to a bricklayer. In your own trade, if you have, again, those special scaffolds, pay particular attention to the requirements and the rules and regulations from Cal OSHA. Most likely will be asked some very specific questions about those scaffolds. Let's flip over to page HS20. Let's look at a couple of additional scaffolds over here. The boatswain's chair or the bosun's chair. Note that there's only one worker per chair in that situation. There's only really room, but sometimes people can be a little crazy and try to load it up with more than one. Let's drop down to horse scaffolds. These are frequently asked about in several trade exams. Let's look at the maximum scaffold height. For a collapsible horse, it's only 6 feet, so not very tall. For a single horse, the limit is 10 foot in height, and a maximum of 2 tiers. If you've got a lower tier and an upper tier, again, the maximum is still the same, only 10 feet. On a ladder jack scaffold, it's where you have 2 ladders with a platform across them, and again, look at the diagram there. The maximum height is 16 feet. I've been on a couple of those. You know, I don't particularly care for those. They seem a little out in the middle of space, but it is legal as long as you keep them at 16 feet high or lower. On the window jack scaffold at the bottom of the page there, again, there's another 1 worker per scaffold situation. Let's flip over to page HS21. We've finished up with scaffolds and now we're on to electrical. Let's look at wiring methods and devices, the second paragraph there. Flexible cord may be used in place of any of the permanent wiring methods for temporary work. It may not be spliced except for number 12 or larger type S. Skirted attachment plugs must be used on all equipment operating at more than 300 volts. So more than 300 volts, make sure you have a skirted attachment plug in place. Look at grounding. Electrical installations must be grounded. Go ahead and read through that. Let's look at outdoor wiring. Clearance from the ground. We have a couple of clearances as in the next 2 or 3 paragraphs, but we're looking at clearance from the ground. Note that we have a 10-foot clearance, a 12-foot, a 15-foot, and an 18-foot. The thrust or the basic point is here, the more traffic you have, the more height you need for decent safety. So read through that section there, clearance from the ground. Next section, overhead high voltage conductors. Go ahead and read that. Understand that you want to be at a safe distance as you work underneath high voltage lines. Outdoor wiring, clearance from buildings. Before it was clearance from the ground. In this situation, it's clearance from buildings, neighboring buildings. Go ahead and read that. For example, open wiring and cables must clear a roof by 8 feet. Let's go on to page HS22. Ground fault circuit interrupters, GFIs or GFCIs. In this diagram here, it is a swimming pool situation. And this diagram is based on the electrical safety orders of Cal OSHA. If you are using a NEC, that is a National Electric Code situation, you may find different numbers. If so, make sure that you know which context you are in. Are you in the NEC or the National Electric Code context, or are you in a context in which Cal OSHA applies? Machinery lockout and blockout. This again is another very important item. A lockout situation, of course, is when you are going into an environment where the machine, if it is not turned off, can be very dangerous. So you turn it off and you put a lock on it. If it's a very dangerous situation, you may see 2 or 3 locks and several keys distributed to several individuals to make sure that nobody turns that machine back on again. A blockout is a mechanical block, such that the machine, for example, a stamping machine, cannot come down because there's huge blocks in the way. Switchboard clearances. Look at this at the bottom of the page here, talking about how much working clearance you should have in equipment, electrical equipment. Read through that on the bottom, and then let's turn on to page HS23. We're looking at tools. Go ahead and read through that, control switches, so on and so forth. Let's look at power tools for a minute. Well, it's pretty obvious. The more you do that, the more you abuse the cord, it gets stretched, the covering gets broken away. Pretty soon you've got a couple of bare wires ready to contact each other, or worse, somebody who grabs it and doesn't realize it. Power-operated tools must be grounded or double insulated. They should be kept out of wet locations. Go ahead and read through the rest of that at the bottom of the page there. And let's turn on to page HS24. Let's look at PAT, powder-actuated tools. That is powder, not power. And what do we mean by powder-actuated? Well, this is typically a gun that will fire a hardened nail into concrete, for example, and it's powdered by basically a .22 shell without the bullet. It's put into the gun, and in place of the bullet, it's actually the nail. It's a very convenient device, but in the hands of somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, can be a dangerous item. So there are a number of rules and regulations. Let's look at a few of them here. What must you provide with each tool? A manual, again I'm at the top here, those first 4 bullets. A power load chart, second bullet there. Inspection and service record, and tools to repair and service the powder actuated tool. And there's a number of bullets here. What do we have here? 8 bullets that are talking about where you should not use that powder actuated tool. For example, in an explosive environment, so on and so forth. Go ahead and read through the rest of those. In the middle of the page there, where it begins, eye or face protection is required for operators and assistants. Read through that paragraph. Pay particular attention to the second to last sentence where it begins, warning signs. Warning signs bearing the words powder actuated tools in use must be conspicuously displayed within 50 feet of work. And most of the time you will find on a job site when somebody is using one of these, you'll hear fire in the hole before the thing goes off, so people are not surprised or shocked by the sudden explosive sound. So again, powder actuated tools, take care to read through that. Look through the rest of these tools on this page: concrete finishing, airless spray guns, portable circular power or skill saws, radial arm saws. Read through those, understand the safety concept behind each one of those. Going on to page HS25. Table saws, band saws, saw speed, chainsaws. Go ahead and read through that. Again, understanding the concept of safety there being presented. Let's look at portable compressors for a minute. Safety valves must be popped at least weekly. Tank must be drained daily. Make sure you understand the difference between popping the tank and draining the tank. And air tanks require a permit issued by DOSH. Go ahead and read through pneumatic tools, nailers, and staplers. And at the bottom of the page, let's start in on heavy construction equipment. One of the things I want to particularly make sure you understand is that last sentence. Flagmen wearing orange vests are required at all locations where barricades and warning signs cannot control the moving traffic. Turning over to page HS26. Let's look at rollover protection and seatbelts. Why rollover protection? Well, in earth-moving equipment, you're always on a grade of some kind or another, and you can be just a little bit tipped over more than you think you are. Rollover protection and seatbelts are required for the following equipment with a brake horsepower rating above 20. Go ahead and look at those 8, 10 and so bullets of different types of machines. One of the most important things, and one of the things that you often see on the trade exam, is a question about the backup alarm. And let me just simply read this paragraph to you here. Every vehicle with a body capacity of 2.5 cubic yards or more that hauls construction material must be equipped with an automatic backup alarm that sounds immediately on backing, and that will normally be audible from a distance of 200 feet. All other vehicles operating where backward movement is hazardous must be equipped with an automatic backup alarm or its equivalent. So 200 feet, that's the distance you should be able to hear that backup alarm. If that truck or machine carries more than 2.5 cubic yards, make sure you have an automatic backup alarm on it. Read through the rest of that page, and let's flip over to page HS27. We have more information regarding high-lift trucks, cranes, derricks, and hoisting. High-lift trucks, go ahead and read down through those first 3 paragraphs, and let me make a little emphasis on this 4th paragraph here. Before leaving a forklift unattended, the operator must lower the forks, shut off the engine, and set the brakes or block the wheels. Important piece of information. May well likely be asked that question on your exam. Go ahead and read the rest of that paragraph. Let's look a little bit at cranes, derricks, and hoisting. Each crane, derrick, and cableway exceeding a capacity of 3 tons must be certified annually by a qualified person. So, more than 3 tons, you need an annual certification. Go ahead and read through the rest of that, making note regarding mobile hydraulic cranes, especially if that's going to be involved in your trade. Now let's get on to page HS28. Let's go ahead and look this over, particularly the boom type mobile cranes. At the end of that section there, the 4th paragraph, a single line paragraph, a fire extinguisher rated at least 10 BC, formerly 5 BC, must be accessible in the cab. What does that mean? 10 BC. Simply means this. 10 refers to the pounds of reacting extinguishing agent in the canister or the extinguisher, and BC refers to the type of fires that can be put out with that agent or that extinguisher. B referring to an oil fire, C referring to an electrical fire. And then crane demolition work, derricks, and hoisting. Go ahead and read through that again. If these relate to your trade, pay particular attention to them. Moving on to page HS29, hot work, cutting, heating, or welding. A dry chemical or carbon dioxide fire extinguisher rated at 6 BC or more must be kept near cutting, heating, or welding. If bottled fuel gases are in use, it must be at least 10 BC. So again, there's those extinguisher numbers. There'd be 6 pounds on the first requirement, 10 pounds on the second requirement. And go ahead and read through the rest of that, what welders are required to wear, and so on and so forth. Let's look briefly at gas welding. Read through that paragraph there, and at the bottom of that paragraph, the last sentence of that paragraph, make sure that you understand this last sentence. Oxygen cylinders in storage must be separated from fuel gas cylinders by 20 feet or by a non-combustible barrier 5 feet high. So if you have an acetylene tank and an oxygen tank, you need to separate those by 20 feet or by a non-combustible barrier 5 feet high. Go ahead and read through arc welding and welding ventilation, and let's get on to page HS30. Let's take a little look at demolition here. Here's a common question that you'll find on your trade exam. A DOSH issued permit is required for demolition of any structure or building more than 36 feet high. So if you're going to take down a building that's 40 feet high, do you need a permit? Yes, you do. It's over 36 feet. You need to go to DOSH to get that permit. Go ahead and read through the rest of that, and let's look at explosives. A person holding a California blaster's license must be physically present to perform or direct and supervise blasting operations. All blasting accidents affecting worker safety must be reported to DOSH within 24 hours. And there's several bullets here explaining what conditions are needed to be safe when using explosives. First one, of course, is open flames and smoking being prohibited within 50 feet of location in which explosives are handled. Look at the use of black powder is prohibited. There's a little bit of a story why that came about. In the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, the Army was involved in creating fire breaks as the fire roared through San Francisco, and they simply had to blow up buildings to create those fire breaks. When they did that, after a while they had run out of TNT, and so they switched over to black powder. And black powder is not as controllable as TNT. The result was that a lot of the debris that went up in the air went up not only in little pieces, but in little flaming pieces, and came down, of course, in little flaming pieces, simply spreading the fire rather than making a fire break. Go ahead and finish reading through the rest of that, and then look through pile driving. And let's note one item here on that second line. Hearing protection is likely to be required. If there's any doubt in that situation, tell your employees to go ahead and use the hearing protection. And that finishes up HS30. Let's go on to HS31, false work and vertical shoring. What is false work? False work is temporary structural supports that are used during construction and then removed. In a masonry situation, you build first a wooden arch, put it in place, and then over that wooden arch you set your bricks until they are secure and cured, and then you take it away a couple of days later. That would be false work. Minimum design load, total combined live and dead load, again I'm here at the top of the page here, 100 pounds per square foot. Live load and form work, 20 pounds per square foot. So take a look at that, read through the rest of this here. Let's get down to roofing operations here. Now you'll see as you go along in these next pages here, we have quite a bit on roofing operations. If you are a roofer, if you're taking C39 trade exam, you're going to need to put a lot of time in on this here and make sure you know the details and the numbers on this here. But go ahead, look through this, and let's flip over to page HS32. Again, this page really deals with roofing, so if you're in a trade that doesn't deal with roofing, you can look over this quite quickly. But you C39s, take a careful look at this. Understand that we're looking at a couple of different slopes here. For example, in A, for monolithic roof coverings, for example, built-up roofs, where the slope is 0 in 12 through a 4 in 12, then these 6 or so items apply. And let's look over to page HS33. Again, we're still dealing with roofers in the top half of the page, and the flash point is dealt with. In other words, a flash point is where a vapor collected because of the material that you're using, asphalt for example, is ready to turn into flame. It's a very dangerous situation. You want to know about that. And the last section we're going to talk about is Cal/OSHA inspections. If an inspector is on your site, you may end up with a citation, hopefully not, of course, but you may end up with a general citation, which is for relatively minor safety or health hazards. No penalty is issued if there are less than 10 items cited. A serious citation for hazards that may cause a major illness or injury. And a regulatory for failing to comply with record-keeping or reporting requirements. And if you come to your site and find a yellow tag there, it may have been issued for a clearly dangerous condition that would result in death or serious injury if allowed to continue. And only DOSH may remove that tag. You don't want to touch that tag, but you want to deal with it right away. And this covers safety orders. And I'd like you to know that we also have a glossary as well as an index following immediately. And behind that, some additional information that you should read. Please go ahead and take a look at that. Now remember, once again, these questions from health and safety can be as much as 15–20% of your test. So it's a significant amount of your test. And not only that is a test matter, but it's also a smart business matter. Put that into your business, protect your employees, protect yourself. And may you do well in the construction industry and well on the exam. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and interest.
This completes the lecture on health and safety. Please note that a glossary of terms, an index, and additional information can be found at the end of the chapter.